welcome to the Enhanced Perspective. I think that's the name that we landed upon last week or so. Thank you for joining us. This is Team GSP, Broderick Chavez, and me, just Charlie Jung. So we were chatting for a second before we turned on this recording about what we're going to talk about today. And I flipped a coin in my head, and let's go with training. Specifically, what do we look for when we are looking at how to build a proper training program? And I guess we can start with in the realm of hypertrophy, bodybuilding.
Question about the question. Are
Yes.
we creating our own, or are we evaluating and selecting an existing one? Not that the metrics are different, but maybe the method would be different.
You know what? Dealer's choice. Surprise me.
Okay.
Go down the path you prefer at the moment.
Okay. I'll actually go with the evaluation. Like, what tools would you use to evaluate is brand X or brand Y or brand Z a sensible training program, whether it's an app, a book, or a spreadsheet or whatever? I actually think that's a really good question, and I think it's shockingly more simplistic and straightforward than people want to believe. And my first point on my checklist is probably going to make you and everyone else laugh, but I'm very serious. It should appeal to you. Full fucking stop. You should be interested in it. You should be like, oh, I something about that made me look. I like that. Then once it passes that filter, then I would say the basic fundamentals of progressive overload are that there is a definable structure in terms of how much total work to do on how many total days, how to escalate over time, some measure of benchmarking or ensuring that there's actual progress, and then a couple of very simple sort of binary checks and balances. If this happens, do this. If this doesn't happen, do this. And literally, I think that is it. I know that sounds shockingly abbreviated, but I actually think it is that abbreviated.
Yeah. I to be honest, I think that most people hearing that would agree with you. I think where most people, seriously. But I think where most people get stuck is now implementing that for themselves.
But see, therein lies, I think, the problem that is sort of the more of the user / buyer's remorse kind of thing is people always want to then interject themselves. Why buy a thing if you're going to interject yourself and have a better idea? If you're going to buy an over-the-counter thing, then fucking do that. Don't buy a used car with the intention like, oh, I'm going to fix this up and make it just the way I fucking want it. No, then just build a car from fucking scratch.
Yeah.
I think that the idea of spending your money is that you've identified the product that somebody's already created to your desired specifications.
Mm-hmm. And just to make it clear to the user, to the listeners right now, you're talking about pre-made training programs and methodologies that are already. You can just go online or open a book and find it.
Right. I'll use a name just that has no affiliation to you, me, or anyone else. Like you look at, you go on Amazon and just say, books on weight training, and they come up, and you read 4 or 5 of them, and then you go, this 531 sounds like I like it. Like it the keywords they use, the marketing, if you will. Then you take it and you go, okay, does it meet that checklist? I like it, but now does it offer progression over time, a way to manage fatigue, a checklist of if this happens, do that, if that happens, do this, and you go down the list and you go, yes, it does. And then now it's in the, I could buy that if I wanted. Maybe shop a little more, maybe not. But that's how I would do that. It's kind of like buying a car. Like the first thing you look at is, I like the look of that. Mm-hmm. The next thing is, all right, will it do what I fucking want it to do?
Yeah.
And I think you shop for this sort of thing exactly the same way. Now, I think you should have 100% buy-in and do it. And then after I'm going to use very specific language, an unreasonable period of time, you then can draw a line and go, all right, I now really understand this. I've really identified strengths and weaknesses based on me, and I will make these changes. But I think that unreasonable period of time is more like a year to 18 months,
Yeah.
not I went one time through the macro cycle and it shit the bed. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's
I agree with that.
probably disappointing, but I think that's what I would. I'll answer it this way: if one of my kids came to me and asked me how to pick a program, that's what I would tell them.
Okay. Okay. Now that said, we know that is likely for beginners and anyone, what we consider beginners, and anyone beyond that, or what they consider those non-beginners. They're already thinking beyond, like, what can I do to now tweak things, and from there people run into issues. They start tweaking things, they don't know they don't know what variables to actually balance, right?
Absolutely.
So where's the first pitfall that you see happening with these type of modifications to a program, or when they build their own program?
I think that there is a hard fork in the road at the enhanced unenhanced divide. I
Okay.
think both groups make mistakes, but I think that the enhanced unenhanced really highlights the mistakes. I'm only going to address the enhanced side because one, I don't specialize in, and two, I don't care about the unenhanced side. But when that fork in the road of enhanced unenhanced, most of the time enhanced people default to harder work, things that make the training more difficult rather than restraint and expansion of volume. And I believe sincerely that for an enhanced individual, that is the better route to take. So when there's a variable, take the one that does not require more teeth grinding or proximity to failure. Take one of the other variables.
Okay. So essentially, less load, less further away from failure, and just more overall work for enhanced.
Well, either more sets, more reps, or more volition potentially.
Okay.
Which is the thing people leave out. They kind of lump that into intensity, but that's not necessarily always the case. But yes, definitely not more load, not more intensifications. I don't think the first thing you should add is forced reps or partial reps or I don't even know what it's called now. It used to be rest pause, clustered nuts or whatever they are now.
Something.
Like I don't think those are the things you should default to. I think as an enhanced athlete, just simply doing more of what you're doing is a better solution than doing something more.
Okay,
more
so
aggressive.
just to make sure that we are, listening. I mean, hearing you correctly, because I just need to pick this part apart a little bit, because at a point you said more volume,
Yep.
and then but then you ended up saying just more of what they're doing, right?
Yes.
Which I think what you meant to say was the second part and not the first part. Because my question, you'll see where I'm getting. My question here
Please.
is, you said more volume, unless you're
Mhm.
defining volume in a different way that I do,
Okay.
because somewhere in between that you said they should be either doing more sets or more reps, right?
Right.
For me, a set is counted as the volume marker against.
Yeah.
And the way you look at it is different. You're looking at total reps.
It is. The way I look at it is different. And I again, when I get up on stage or what have you and pontificate on this, I start with a definition. I didn't do that here, so I do apologize. But I define volume as load times sets times reps times frequency. That to me is, or it used to be before that kind of framing. You used to hear back in the Soviet era, you would hear total tonnage, total amount of weight
tonnage.
lifted over a period of time.
Yeah.
That to me is volume. So either sets or reps or both, and even the addition of load is a nominal expansion of volume. You're lifting more weight,
Mhm.
but load on the bar is the least efficient way to accumulate volume.
Yep.
So I default to reps and sets.
I have a question now. I'm going on a tangent now, only because
Please.
you have more information about this and more knowledge and more experience just
Eh,
through the decades.
I think you sell
When-
yourself short. I might have more Yes,
More of it, yeah, yeah.
culminated
I'm not saying
experience.
I'm short on it, yeah.
Yeah.
Just coming up in the lifting world for me the last several decades, I've always heard that referred to in books and literature as usually work, not
Yes.
volume. So I guess just for my own knowledge, because I'm interested,
Mm,
are there any places, any person in particular, or books that refer to it as volume over work, or is it something that you prefer for a
Um,
reason?
well, it is definitely the nomenclature in which I prefer, but it's interesting because that has weaved in and out pretty significantly. If you go back, I can actually reach them. They're right here. The quote Russian texts,
Mhm.
Verkhoshansky, Roman, Medvedev, etc. All of those documents refer to total tonnage with the parenthetical load times reps times sets
Mhm.
times frequency. And then they even had like Prilipin actually made charts of approximately total tonnage targets
Mhm.
for varying sports. An Olympic lifter should approximately squat, I think it was 10,000 kilos per week. Um, so, but then somewhere in the sort of like Weeder era, the language kind of moved toward work and then
Got it.
weaved in and out of volume and work. And I honestly think, and this is an opinion, I'm not a historian. You would probably need somebody like Randy Roach, who's much more of a actual historian. I suspect a lot of the framing of the language in the bodybuilding world, which was basically the Weeder publication world, was the language was framed to not be contiguous with either the Eastern European or the high intensity Arthur Jonesian. So
Mhm.
I think some of their choice of wording was just, I don't want to sound like those people.
Got it. Okay, so it's more of a marketing choice
Yes.
to
Yes.
divert
Yes.
from the original. So it was originally called volume.
Yes.
That pretty much equation.
Yes,
Okay.
and if you look at not bodybuilding, which is I think a great thing to do, and you look at some, by the modern mindset, archaic training programs like Texas Method or the Star Method or some of the stuff that has its underpinnings all the way back in the 50s, they very distinctly use the language of volume.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting, and that makes me think about, I guess, how to approach training from two different angles. One where intensity is actually not even in the equation, right? I mean, to a degree, I'm sure you can have like boundaries. Like before we use this equation, we're assuming that at least this is happening.
Yes, and actually, again, I don't ever mean this shit to be a marketing fucking tool.
Mhm.
But I guess in a weird way it sort of is. But Team Evil GSP has a hypertrophy book. We wrote a book, Sticky Note Hypertrophy, and there is exactly what you're saying. There's a nominal connotation of to be a work set,
Mhm.
something other than a warm up. It needs to be roundabout at least 30+% of 1 RM. Like anything below 30% of 1 RM, you're in the aerobic zone. Like you could just lift that forever. Like there's no actual fatigue or effort involved. So, and honestly, that I believe, separate conversation probably, but it works into this conversation in that I actually believe that is the fork in the road, natural to unnatural, if you will, is I believe and I'm not an expert, you would have to, ask Lyle or somebody who is. I think the requisite proximity to failure or requisite,
It's
not even
much lower in
failure,
enhanced
proximity to
mode.
1 RM is
Mhm.
much closer to be stimulative in the natural world than it is in the enhanced world. I think in the enhanced world, anything above 30% 1 RM is going to do something. Whereas
Okay.
to a natural, I don't know if that's the case.
Okay. I have more questions now. I want to see how you're thinking about this, because I'm curious. And a couple times explain while you're explaining that you almost got into it, but kind of pulled yourself back from talking about proximity to failure
Yep.
versus the percentage
Yep.
of your 1 RM.
Which are not the same thing.
Exactly. This you see where I'm getting with this, right? Where my not confusion, but interest in just how you are thinking about training. Um,
Well,
is Do you think that's a lifter has to? I don't know. You hated this question already. Has to hit some level of, I guess, some threshold. They have to breach this threshold of they're this close to failure for that set to be stimulative, or it doesn't matter as long as it's over X percentage of 1 RM. Obviously, different for enhanced and natural lifter. What,
okay.
what are your thoughts on that?
I totally understand the question. And to be fair, I mean, duh, you're my colleague and all this. You're not a fucking idiot. But I'm going to be a little patronizing and say that's actually a really good question. Insofar as it's such a good question, it took me 20 of the 40 years I've been doing this to really think I have an answer to that question. Like it is actually very relevant. And I'm momentarily not going to use weight training as the parable analogy, etc. Momentarily just leave sports and think
Mhm.
sun tanning, which is a stress reflex. You
Sure.
expose yourself to a stress, it is of a certain intensity. You are damaged, you recover, you respond. It's basic Hans Selye check mark, uh, gas, general adaptation syndrome.
Mhm.
Okay. So in a suntan, there is essentially two requisites. One, that the sun is bright enough to be stimulative. Tanning in winter at lower latitudes is not. You could stay out forever. You could stay out for up in Alaska where the sun is out for days on end. You could be in the sun all of those days, and it's not going to be intense enough to harm you. So
Mhm.
yes, you must have a proximity to the equator
Mhm.
sufficient to be stimulative. That seems very reasonable. An incandescent light bulb in your kitchen is not going to fucking tan you. It's not bright enough. We
Sure.
know that. Okay. So yes, there must be some threshold of it's bright enough, it's hard enough. Then secondly, now it's a duration game. At
Mhm.
some point, in the case of the sun, it's steady state. It's that bright and no more. You can't
Mhm.
put extra plates on the bar.
So
So
time is a variable
right.
there.
So now it's almost the pure volume equation. You have a static intensity, and
Mhm.
the only thing you can really escalate is the duration, the reps. You can stay out 60 minutes, 70 minutes, 9 hours, etc. So to me, that's the kind of purest distillation of this volume equation. Is
Yeah.
everything's fixed? The sun is fixed, your latitude is fixed, and the only thing you can do is stay out longer or not. To me, that is the purest expression of this. Now, could you cheat? Let's say you live in London.
Mhm.
Could you cheat and go on vacation to Greece, much closer to the equator, more intense sun? So now the 8 hours you could stay out in the sun in London suddenly becomes 4 because the
Mhm.
sun is so much brighter. So that's, again, how I think of that volume equation. So then just move those numbers back into weight training. It's yes, the bar must weigh some percentage of your 1 RM or you're doing nothing. But after that, it's really just it's just a time issue. If you
Mhm.
can
And
curl
volume, and yeah, when we're
right,
talking
if you
the
you know if
being
you can
equal.
right, if you can curl 100 pounds for 10, it's just more tens. You keep doing more and add every repetition is 100 pounds. And you just imagine there used to be a commercial back in the 90s for Twin Labs, and it was actually kind of clever. I think it was Lee Haney, and he'd do a rep, and then he would throw the bar in a pile, and then do a rep and throw the bar in a pile, and
And that's your
it
tonnage
went
essentially.
right, right, and at the end of the workout, it's like when you lift all of this weight, you need these pills or whatever. But it was kind of an interesting mental image of like, holy shit, that's rather a lot of fucking barbells he lifted.
Mhm.
And that, it was meant to be like clever and sell, high school kids, whatever, liver pills or something. But it was actually a really good description of what the fuck's going on.
Yeah. Um, I always love that analogy, the whole tanning thing. It makes it makes it easy for people to kind of grasp the concept.
I think it
Now,
does, and I also think it ruins the hyperfrequency argument.
yeah, it does. But I'm gonna continue to annoy you here,
Well,
and
please,
point something out, or
please.
actually, I have a question about it. The intensity of the sun.
Yep.
Again, we're going back to the original
Yep.
question. Do you equate the intensity of the sun of percentage of 1 RM or
Yes.
proximity of failure?
No, 100%. I personally, and this is where I deviate from
Hmm.
sort of the classical definitions. The classical definition of intensity is percentage of 1 RM. It is
Hmm.
load. In a
Yeah.
physics equation, you can't quantify effort. You can only
Hmm.
quantify load. So
Sure.
in physics,
Because
it's
effort is it's not objective technically.
right.
It's
It
subjective.
is a percentage of 1 RM, and then it's relatively well understood that higher percentages of 1 RM require more effort and mental acuity to complete than lesser.
So
Now, I personally will add a sort of artistic variable of effort. I do think there are some parameters on effort.
gotcha. That's where I was getting at. Where are your parameters of effort in training?
Well, I actually have kind of the opposite of what most people would assume. I actually have a cap, not a basement.
Okay.
I actually think that, again, if you are not involved in the high intensity, and I'll come to that in a minute because it's
Hmm.
actually relevant, um, I think that too much effort is the evil. I
Hmm.
think the quote overtraining, overtaxing, overreaching, whatever you want to call it, is that hyperstimulation of effort rather than I just did 3 extra of these and now I'm tired. There's a difference between tired and emotionally exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think the emotionally exhausted comes from the expression of effort, not from the expression of work.
Hmm.
So I would put a cap at some sort of in my mind. Again, it's artistic. It's not scientific. It can't be quantified. But I would say in somewhere in the 90% of effort range. Anything above a 90% effort, I think, is potentially,
Uh,
if not problematic, short lived.
yeah, I think not everyone, but most people listening have probably trained at least a few times hard enough where they understand that concept, right?
Yeah.
It's where they break that threshold of effort, and
Yes.
after the set or after the workout, they feel drained, not in the sense of physically, but like mentally, emotionally, kind of like psychologically, essentially.
Yeah. And
Um,
it kind of falls into that again. And it's something that maybe the average person doesn't really, kind of have an experience with. But for instance, you can drive, you can get in your car, and this applies to anything, but I'll use driving as the example for 8, 10, 12 hours, and you can be vigilant and casual, casually vigilant and drive safely for hours and hours and hours.
mhm.
You have a level of fatigue, but it's not catastrophic. One near death event, somebody cuts you off, you could one of those is more fatiguing than a whole day of driving.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for anyone listening that has done any sort of motorsports ever, can tell you
Yes.
easily that that being on a track or a drag strip, anything like that, that distance is so fatiguing. Like at the end of
Yes.
the day, you feel completely wiped out.
And that is to me more effort, intensity of effort rather than volume of work.
Yeah.
Volume of work is very, very sustainable.
Yep.
People have worked really hard at just being alive for thousands of years, farming and foundry work and what have you. But that very acute life and death stress reflex is shockingly taxing.
So now going back to you said that you have a cap, but you have no basement
Correct.
at all.
Well, again,
Because
do I
so my
believe one exist? Do I believe one exists? Yes. However, if you are motivated enough to be engaged in this conversation, do I think you will approach it? No. Do you see?
yes, but there is. So like we're not essentially you're not here you're not sitting here telling people if you use your base minimum of 30% 1 RM and do a rep at
Correct.
every minute, which should be super easy, right? And get
Yes.
all your time, volume, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, done that way. That
Yes.
wouldn't equate to what you want to
Correct.
get out of it.
There.
Yeah.
Yes, and this actually goes to another concept that did in fact actually exist once historically, and that was density. The concept of density, in that
Mhm.
there must be a certain amount of effort in a certain amount of time over a certain number of sets. In a general sense, there needs to be a threshold density of work. Yes, but
I like that idea, because
yeah,
the way again, I don't need it to fit into the equation, but if we're using equations, I want it to make sense. So
yes,
if you think about density as in like all these things must happen within 2 hours, let's say, whatever, right?
correct.
Then I love it at that point, right? It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Now, real quick, let me kind of not necessarily double talk, but explain why I'm very I don't want to say hubristic, but why I think my way of viewing things is the right way. And again, I did say I believe that expressing volume via sets and reps is the superior model, and I have a number of reasons why. We didn't cover even half of them. I think in general, repetitive use injuries are much, I will say, easier to manage than the potential catastrophic injuries of just chasing load.
Yeah.
So again, still not a free ride. There's still injuries. I mean, I'm preparing for a knee replacement. I know of what I speak, but I
Mhm.
think they're more manageable. I have so many reasons why I think volume via load is the least effective method. However, and also I don't say least effective, but effort intensity of effort is a lesser concern. However, I am roughly speaking benchmarking that concept of it needs to be above this given percentage of 1 RM, and then you just chase volume to achieve a cumulative amount of work. If you chose to spin that on its head and say, I'm only willing to do this much work, full stop.
Mhm.
Now the only options you have are to express effort and load, which makes high intensity type training completely coherent. I didn't say the best, the greatest, but it is now coherent. If you go, I am only going to do 2 sets of chest, so the only way I can meet those other density parameters is if I work really fucking hard with the most amount of weight I possibly can to get the same, and again, there used to be a word for this, inroad to my momentary abilities.
Mhm.
So I do think that my way of viewing it is the correct way because it works no matter which path you take. I
Yeah.
personally think my path is again, I'll use the language of more sustainable one.
More sustainable for more people, and I'd have to
Correct.
agree with that. Yeah.
But the sheer fact that the exact same set of rules applies, I think, lends itself to a greater truth.
I believe so. I think it's also it's the epitome of not being dogmatic about training methodologies, right? You're giving a framework, and as long as you're meeting all the variables,
Yes.
or like you said, a balance. I love that visual of it being on a scale,
Yep.
right? I think I think if more lifters thought about that variables that way, I think they'd have a lot more success with
Yeah.
their own training.
Algebra was the way it was
Yeah.
taught, not I would say taught to me, but it was the way it was repeatedly expressed to me in my youth. Was it's an algebraic equation, and both sides of the equation must balance to
Mhm.
get a correct answer, to get a workable answer. So you just if you're manipulating load over here, it's going to do something to volume over here, and they just must
Yep.
balance.
Um, so just kind of recap for listeners, and Broderick briefly touched on naturals, right? For
Yeah.
naturals, you believe that they probably need to train closer to failure because they don't have the benefits of drugs in place.
Well, let me word it this way, because again, I want to be very specific here because I don't like the preponderance of people that are leaving their field of expertise. There's a lot of this, I'm an expert in one thing, so I might as well be an expert in everything. I do not see myself that way. I am a very niche creature. I know an awful lot, or at least I believe I do, about enhancement and training
Mhm.
thereof. And I've done it at the expense of worrying about unenhanced. So, what I would say to your remark is the experts that I believe are most likely credible tell me that that is the big difference. That the percentage of 1RM and the percentage of momentary effort must be much higher.
Yep. And I agree with that. I mean, you know this already, but for people who aren't listening, like I'd say roughly at any even time, 60%, 60, 70% of my roster are naturals and 30 to 40% are enhanced. And I consistently find that if the naturals do not approach closer to failure, their progress pretty much stalls. They
Yeah.
must train really hard because they don't have the benefits of the drugs in place to pretty much give them that leeway. Now, for enhanced people listening, and maybe some people are listening and thinking about taking, trying a different approach out of training. A lot of guys train very intensely all the time. And for me, me included, for the most
Yep.
part, right?
No, no,
Nowadays, not so much, but in the past, definitely. Um, I know that you have more artistic approach of to effort, but for I guess people who uh, don't want to think too much and or have trouble with grasping that concept
Mhm.
and easier to kind of just think about in reps left in the tank or RPE, however you want to define that. What range would you put them at if they would want to give a higher total volume or the way you put it work done versus their current approach of their high intensity training,
And I
aka
really
practical knowledge.
no, I get it. And this is a really challenging thing for me to express because I do not trust
Yes,
this
yes. I
RPE, this self-identified
Wait,
RPE thing.
how about
Um,
this? Give your suggestion or advice based on the fact that you don't trust it.
well, what I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna give you a
Mhm.
historical precedent, and then my sort of vague recommendation. The historical precedent is this, and I shudder to reference them so often because it sounds vaguely like some sort of hero worship or something, and it's not. It's just there's so goddamn few people that had coherent thought in this fucking industry over the last 50 years. There's not a lot to reference. But the Nautilus people back in the late 60s, early 70s had this concept of inroad. And it was an engineering concept because Arthur Jones, was genuinely an engineer at heart. He approached all of this with the mindset of an engineer. Actually, aeronautic engineering was his stock and trade before moving into exercise commercially. And the concept of inroad was that exercise should erode your momentary abilities by about 30%. That was the inroad into your abilities. So if you walked in the gym able to bench press 100 pounds, you should leave the gym barely being able to do 70. And that means the amount of work you did eroded your abilities sufficiently that the necessary response mechanisms will engage to replenish, recover, supercompensate, etc. Um, I think that in a very generic global sense, that's incredibly accurate. So, my rough advice to people is train in such a way that you are 25-ish% spent. If you think of yourself as a pocket full of money, spend 25% of it in that session.
Okay.
Is that I realize that's equally as arbitrary as stop 3 reps short of what you think you can, but I like my metaphor better.
No, 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 no. Your metaphor again. I think the way that advice is given here is that it works better for most people in the sense that like it can't be wrong. I mean, or not can't be. It's wrong less of the time, but again, I'm looking out for some of the listeners here, and they're gonna hear that and still be unsure how to approach it. And again, gun to your head.
Yep.
I know saying that you should say just pull the fucking trigger, but gun to your head. What range would you give them in terms of how many they have left in the tank, or even RPE if you like that method better? Because that has a lot to do with the reps and their perceived effort.
Once again, I'm going to use. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to cheat, but I'm also going to answer you. Instead of an RPE, I would use the same thing, only bigger. I would say stop your workout at a point when 3 more sets would kill you.
3 more sets would kill you. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. If you could honestly say at a point, like, if I had to do 3 more of these sets, I wouldn't train tomorrow. That's a great place to stop. Instead of an
That
RPE, it's kind of a set PE.
I agree with that for the most part. I think that's the way that I like to train, right? But I'm gonna again, you're gonna hate me.
I
I'll
know, I
point
know.
out that I'll point out that advice applies to both lower intensity and high intensity folk.
But it does, because again,
Yes.
remember when I said just do more of what you're doing?
Yep.
Again, I am coherent. You don't have to
Mhm.
like it. You just have to like that I've
Oh
thought this
no,
the
I
fuck
agree.
through.
Yeah, and I agree with all these concepts, 100.
Now,
percent
to be fair,
I'm
like,
back into a
again,
corner.
do more of what you're doing. So if you're doing
Mhm.
sets of 6, yes, just do more of them until you think you couldn't do 3 more. Yes. Now, if you came to me with money and said, fix my training, I would say, let's add 1 rep to every set for a couple of weeks over weeks until these
Mhm.
sets are 10 instead of 6. That would
Mhm.
be my version of escalation. But I would also
Got
hold
it.
your dick while we're doing it and make sure it's very carefully supervised. But if you just want generic advice, I'd say do more of what you're doing and
Yeah.
stop about 3 sets before you think it would kill you.
Yeah. No, no, I agree with all this. And again, like I don't know if I did that. I mean, I guess purposely and also kind of like just maybe subconsciously past year and a half, 2 years. I've been slowly going towards that route of I know that it looks like I train intensely, right? In my
And you do.
yeah, to a point, but I do think my intensity is still quite shy of what a lot of probably enhanced people train at.
Yes.
Um,
And I think you
and
know that I even criticize, like, even you don't need to train that hard. Like, I
yeah,
literally,
yeah.
um,
But I think, but this, what I was getting at, it's a huge step down from like 2 years ago, and I've been pushing reps much higher and everything, and lo and behold, things don't don't hurt almost like to a point. Shockingly, it's crazy. But yeah, just want to point it out for my own personal kind of experience training
yeah,
that way.
and again, it lends itself to a couple of points. One, I think it's incredibly demonstrative of. I really don't think there's a wrong way.
Yeah,
I just don't really think there is a wrong way, and also rather demonstratively, to the very beginning of this conversation, the very first thing I said is it
if
needs
you
to
enjoy it,
appeal to you. That appeals to you, and it takes a literal lifetime, if ever, to kind of shy away from what genuinely attracted you to this in the first place.
yep, yep, agreed. And I know that some people listening to this will that 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 helps them, some of them, and I know some of them it kind of puts them back at square one, right? Where they're probably thinking like, I want to try these things, but I don't think I'm going to enjoy it. Like, then don't.
And that's a
Or
great reason to not do it. That 100% a reason to not do it.
yes, or what I would suggest is if they're curious, kind of take the approach that you laid out. If you were working with someone, is don't do it all at once. Add a rep. Like you're not going to know the difference between 5 reps and
100%.
6 reps. And if
Very
you do it
incremental.
over a year and a half, 2 years, it's something that you don't even notice happening.
Absolutely. And you sort of like recalibrate, if you will, to it. Interesting kind of you talking about this, like selecting a program. The very beginning of this, not like the nuances of day-to-day management. It actually reminds me of one of the maybe even the very first time I was in the presence of Tom Platz. It was a seminar, not exactly, but for the sake of this seminar, and he was kind of laying out, not kind of, I hate it when I say that. He was very specifically laying out his overarching mindset on training. And he explained it this way. He said, imagine you had no knowledge whatsoever of training. That's who I'm talking to. He said, now make it not training. Let's say you decide, I want a hobby. I want to learn to paint with watercolors. You go to the art shop and you say, hey, I'm new to this whole art thing. I know nothing, but I really want to make a watercolor picture. The person behind the counter would go, we have just the thing for you. We have paint by numbers. It leads you through number by number and tells you exactly how to paint. Person goes, that's what I want. And they get a paint by numbers kit. They get this canvas with numbers all over it, and they get this pack of paints and a little code that says put this color and this number. Mm-hmm. And they sit there and they fill this thing in, and very slowly a fucking picture magically comes into view. And they're amazed and they're wondered. And they do it. And they go buy a new one and they do it again and they do it again. And they're like, fuck, I'm making art. And then ever so slowly, they start to do, I followed the numbers perfectly, but you know what? If this were my picture, I'd put a little extra brown right here. Mm-hmm. And they start adding flares to the paint by numbers to the point where at first it's just 1% flare, and then it's 2, and then 10, and then 20, and 50. And at some point, they actually have the confidence and perhaps the acumen to just go, you know what? Give me a blank fucking canvas. I think I can do this. And they paint. And as kind of silly as that parable is, now keep in mind, this is in the 80s. This is previous to templates and apps. Mm-hmm. That sounds shockingly like how you, me, or anyone else would progress through the I bought a template to fuck it, I'm free forming this thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I'd have to agree with that.
And I think it's a very healthy, boy, I'm going to use the most douchey language I can think of. I think it's a very healthy journey through the things.
No, it's an approach I think most people need to take with most things in life.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. But it's interesting. It's interesting that, and I've had some interaction with Tom over the years, but we're wildly different people with wildly different perspectives on so many things, and yet that story kind of captures it for both of us.
Yeah. Look at we started off talking about training and now life advice.
But I think to your point, I think all things involving people kind of go back to the same kind of core shit, whether it's training or dating or parenting or your job. It's all you're the recurring theme in that. What's the famous remark? No matter where I go, there I am.
Who said that?
It lost to time, but it's very apropos when you think about it.
You should add it to your quotes document. That 94 pages up. I'm at I think page 25 so far.
Oh wow! Yeah, no, there's like 100.
No, I'm actually going through it. Yeah.
And they're awfully diverse and random.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting your own quotes in there, by the way. So that was nice to see. Yeah.
I thought I tried very hard to just put down the ones I thought were mildly profound, and not
no, they're solid. They belonged in the document. Let's say
there's a couple. Have you come across the hobo one yet?
No, no, I have not come across a hobo. I will.
I yes, that I when that person said that, I stopped, took out a notebook, and wrote that down right on the fucking street.
Hopefully, one day people will understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
For people listening, it is a 94-page document of Broderick literally just putting down quotes. That's all it is. And if that doesn't prove that he's autistic, I don't know what does.
By the way, not quotes from me, just quotes I've experienced, just things that
Yes,
it made me just go, "Oh, that's fucking cool." I'm writing that down.
yes, because people do that. Broderick having 100-page documents of quotes.
People do that.
Yes, you are people.
I didn't think that was that atypical.
Yeah, okay. This is a great place to stop this one.
Yeah,
Hopefully people have
absolutely.
enjoyed. If anyone watching has questions of their own or topics they would like for us to tackle,
Yeah.
reach out. Literally message either one of us on any platform or leave a comment in a video. We'll see it and we will give it great thought. Yes.
Or just ignore it. But those are the options.
Yes. But you have the chance.